everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am going to go, hopefully fairly quickly, through my August pile of possibilities. It's not a firm TBR as I like to give myself a lot of room to pull in whatever I feel like reading because summer is my rest, relaxation, and recovery period from work. I say fairly quickly, because a lot of the books, not all, but a lot, are carryovers from previous TBRs that I've done, and it is also over 90 degrees here upstairs and we do not have air conditioning, and I really want to get back downstairs into the air conditioning. Second announcement is do not panic. Yes, there will be more Jane Austen July content coming up this week. I have a new recipe planned that does not involve expensive ingredients, and of course my wrap up for the month. So those will be coming later this week. Keep an eye out for them. I do set myself 2 challenges every month, is to read 1 classic and 1 nonfiction. So for the classic, I have already started because it just called to me after finishing Jane Austen July. I don't know why. Framley Parsonage called to me, which is the 4th book in the Barsetshire series by Anthony Trollope, which is all that I have read of Trollope so far. I started this back in January, I think, and ended up DNFing it at the time because I could not get into it. I have now gotten over that hump. I am now about 30% in. The story is starting to pick up. It is anxiety inducing, but if I have some nice calming music playing, it's going very well. So I will definitely be continuing this. And for my nonfiction, I have a couple of choices if I decide to read a nonfiction at all, since I read much more nonfiction than usual during Jane Austen July. So if none of these appeal to me, I might give myself a break. But I want to try to work one in. They could be number 1, Creativity by John Cleese, which is super tiny, and it's a short, cheerful guide to creativity, how to have more of it, how to harness what you have. It sounds quite fun. Or I could also go for Behind the Scenes with Judi Dench, which is exactly that. It's Judi Dench going through stories from her time in film, in television, in the theater, along with lots of photos from those periods and also from her personal life, which just sounds delightful. Or if I want to keep on the Victorian theme, I might pick up Murder by the Book by Claire Harmon, which is the story of a murder that happened in Victorian London. And somehow, I don't remember exactly how, people blamed either popular novels in general or a particular novel for sparking this murder, and people began to worry about how much influence fiction could have on the real actions of real people. And this sounds fascinating. Claire Harmon is a great historian, so I could go for this. Hello again. Since the rest of my TBR is next to this new reading chair, which I absolutely adore, I thought rather than move the large heavy stack of books, moving myself was probably the easier option. So I'm here in my cozy chair. Yes, in case I get any questions, I'll just cover this now. Yes, I do have a Mary Poppins umbrella. These are graduation cords from my university graduation, medals from dancing competitions I was in when I was younger, and this cushion, which they claim is Mr. Darcy, although I think he looks a lot more like Mr. Knightley. But I am going to tuck Mr. Knightley to the side for the moment. That sounds odd. And tell you about the books I've stacked up here. These are quite simply all books that I feel have a summer-esque vibe. I can't explain why, they just do. So the first one I have is Devotion by Hannah Kent. This is a carryover from June that I did not get to. This is the story of 2 young women who are together on a boat from Germany, I believe, to Australia in the 1600s or thereabouts. And Their families are going to Australia to find more religious freedom, but they end up falling in love with each other on the way. And I've heard nothing but fabulous things. Next, another carryover from June, Goodbye to Berlin, which is quite simply the novel or group of interconnected short stories, at least, that Christopher Isherwood wrote that became eventually the musical Cabaret. I also have The Power by Naomi Alderman, which was recommended to me by so many of my coworkers, and now that the series is out, I feel like I should read it before going back to work again in the fall. I also have Brighton Rock by Graham Greene, which as I understand it, is a mob mystery in the 30s or 50s, maybe the 60s, in, of course, Brighton. And having just watched the Lucy Worsley documentary about British murder novels, I had to ignore a whole section to not be spoiled for this book, but now I really want to read it. And it will be my first Graham Greene. I have no previous experience with him. If I'm looking for a quick, fast read this summer that will give me some anxiety, and summer is a safe place to do that, I could go for The King of Crows by Libba Bray. This is the last in her Diviners series, so obviously I can't tell you much, but they are a group of magical or supernaturally gifted teenagers in New York City fighting this evil that threatens not just them, not just New York City, not just the US, but the entire world, potentially. It is very good, but it is also terrifying. It is young adult, but the characters have to make some really big choices around their powers, around the nature of good and evil, around sex, around terrorism. There have been some deaths. I don't know where this last book is going to go, but I really need to read it. I also have Never Far From Nowhere by Andrea Levy, which is the last book that I need to read in my Passing comparison series. So once I read this, I will finally be able to make that video. This is, I think, very similar to Passing, at least it sounds very similar to Passing by Nella Larson, in that it's about two sisters, I think, who grow up on a council estate in London, but one is much darker skinned than the other. And this leads to them having very different paths in life. I love Andrea Levy's writing. Small Island is one of my favorite books of all time, I think, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Then, since summer is the time when I have the time to tackle large books, I could go for The Eighth Life, Life has rubbed off for some reason, by Nino Rashvilishvili, I think, who is a Georgian author, but I think this was first published in German. Either way, it takes place in Georgia, I think, the country, not the state. And I believe it's a family saga, and chocolate might be involved. I'm really intrigued because I know almost nothing about Georgia, the country, and I'm always down for a good saga, even though it is massive. Then I found these ARCs, or recently published books, at the 2019 BookCon, and I really need to get to them because they are middle grade. This way I could recommend them to my students or pass them along to my coworkers for their libraries. But the first one is Amina's Voice by Hena Khan, I think, H-E-N-A. And the second is The Garden of My Iman by Farhana Zia. And these are two Muslim coming-of-age stories about two young Muslim girls, and I really need to get around to reading these. I could also go for The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine M. Valenti. This was very kindly lent or given to me by Marissa at Blatantly Bookish, and I've heard nothing but great things about it on BookTube. And I really don't want to know a lot about the plot. I feel like the title already gives you quite a lot to go on. I also have Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which I think is about a female aviator in the 1930s, or possibly 1919, somewhere in there. and then the actress in present day who has chosen to play her in a film, and the way that these lives influence each other. I also have The Lamplighters by Emma Stonex, which is about this lighthouse, which I think was mysteriously deserted for a long time, but now the current lighthouse keepers and their wives start looking through logs and start piecing together what happened to the last inhabitants. I also have way too many unread Kate Moss books. So firstly, I have here Labyrinth by Kate Moss, mainly because I really want to read one of the other books in this series, which involves Chopin, but I'm not sure how much the plots rely on each other, so I should read this one first. This one, I think, takes place in medieval France, and that's as much as I know. I also have Home Fire by Camila Shamsi, which I think is a modern Muslim retelling of the Medea? One of those ancient Greek plays. And it was nominated for all sorts of awards. I heard nothing but great things. Need to get around to this. The same goes for A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. Again, this is a story of a modern Muslim family with lots of complicated relationships, lots of complicated issues, and what are they going to do with all of it? I've heard nothing but fabulous things. For some light reading, I had to throw in some Susanna Kearsley as options. The first is A Desperate Fortune. This says that there's a diary of a Jacobite woman, Mary Dundas, but it's in code. And now this amateur code breaker, Sarah, in the present day, is going to France to try and break this code and find out what Mary wrote. And I'm assuming there will be a love story in the historical sections, possibly in the modern sections, and somehow these two women's lives will intersect or influence each other. Or the one I'm leaning towards a bit more is The Vanished Days, which is book 3 in her Slains series, or Scottish series. It goes by both. The Winter Sea was one of my favorite books of 2021, and I just read The Firebird in May, so now I'm ready to move on to book 3. I could also be tempted to read Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, because again, it has gotten nothing but rave reviews, and this is her retelling of Medusa's story. I could finally decide to continue the Discovery of Witches series with book 2, Shadow of Night, which takes our two main characters from book 1, but somehow they end up in Elizabethan England for a variety of reasons. If you're not aware of this series, our main character comes from a family of witches, may or may not be a witch herself, and our main male character is a vampire. And these two groups are not supposed to mix. And then finally, in terms of Kate Moss, I won an arc of The City of Tears in February of 2020, put it off because I hadn't read book 1, read book 1, and then never got around to this one anyway. Again, it takes place in France, but slightly later than medieval. It's now the 1600s, taking place during the Huguenot conflict. I enjoyed book 1. I'm intrigued to see where book 2 is going to go. And those are my potential choices for August. Of course, like I said, I allow myself some room to negotiate if I feel like reading something else. But I am planning on saving a lot of other light and fun reads that I'm really excited about for September, when I start school again and will be really stressed and busy. If I save books that I'm really looking forward to for that period, it may encourage me to pick them up a little bit more, or to make time to pick them up, rather. Let me know down below if you have questions about any of these books, positive thoughts about any of these books, or indeed if you are looking forward to reading something very exciting in August that you think I would enjoy as well. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.